Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Toast the Talk. We're going to talk about how Gareth Southgate would have watched today's match, the race, and hopefully things work out in his favor. We had three folks starting off after qualifying, all three being Britons. We had two Mercedes,
George
one
Russell.
and two, with Russell being at the pole position, Hamilton at second. You had Norris at third, and this has never happened before. So the expectation was that we would have a three-way podium finish, but with the regular British reigns, a lot happened during the race. I think we had about four or five race leaders through the race. But I'll introduce our panelists and have them talk about their take and share in all the surprises of the race that we had and this great racing weekend that we had. Hi Satya and hi Prashanth. Welcome to the show yet again. We've been doing regular programming for a while with Max leading and winning, but this weekend seemed to be very different. Prashanth, your thoughts first up at the back of the race.
Absolutely, Vivek. Thanks for having me here on a Sunday evening. Definitely one of the most exciting races which we have seen for 2024, I would say. Exciting because surprisingly, we did not have a single safety car which has come in. We typically look forward for safety cars to make it exciting, but the rain made it. The multiple leaders who kept changing the positions made it. The overtakes made it, not just at the opening of the pack, but even in the middle sectors, in the middle parts of the races. Uh, Ricardo overtook whatnot. I think overall it was a super excited race, super tense race, I would say a little bit towards the end. But congratulations to Hamilton. I think he's winning after 2021, a pretty long uh, gap of his victorious, to be on the podium at the topmost position. And I think I was just thinking that probably he deserves it, right? I know it's not something which people expect for a Ferrari fan to say. And I'm not saying this because he's coming to Ferrari next year. But I think how he drove and what Mercedes has done over the last 6 months to improve their car performance, the reliability, I think it was a full paisa vasool kind of a race, right? So even for everybody, I think Red Bull had their own share of wins. McLaren's had their own share of wins. Ferrari had their own share of wins, which I'll talk later. But I think it was an end-to-end, a very exciting race for somebody who doesn't want to think that Formula One is just doing 60 laps in a circular track. I think this was one of those races they should watch about. That's my overall opinion about how the race was.
Yep. Before we dig deep into that, let's see what Satya has from his perspective.
Oh no, being a Lewis Hamilton fan, I am over the moon. And now we know the British Grand Prix always delivers. Last year it was Science first win. 2021 was between Lewis and Max. 2020 was one of the most mind-blowing endings where Lewis Hamilton finished the race in three tires because
Uh,
the
What?
front right was punctured. But today, as his last British GP with Mercedes, he could not have finished this race at a better note. I mean, the race on its own was just mind-blowingly exciting. The last few laps, I don't think I was breathing properly because I was just going front and back, just holding my breath, just because Max was catching up. There was just Lewis and Norris in the front. At one point, I was like, "Oh God, I do not want Max to win. I just want Lewis to win." And it happened. It delivered. I can't tell you how excited I am just to see that end. But the it is not just the last few laps. The whole race delivered, and there was excitement or there were action happening throughout, not just the race, but at every position. But we had, like Prashant said, for the lead, there were enough fights that were going on that we were glued to the front and not to whatever was happening in the back. There was action in the back, but we were glued to what was happening in the front.
Yeah, no, I think even from a commentator standpoint, having watched so many races where it was regular programming and we focused a lot more on what was happening at the back, this time around, there's just so much happening in the front. First of all, McLaren has really picked up, to watch Norris and Piastri cleanly overtake Max before the first set of rains came in at around the 18th lap, which then added a lot of mix to the strategies playing out. And then we know how Ferrari and strategies are. So, Prashant, do want to hear your thoughts on how did it play out for Ferrari this race?
It's as usual, it's a mixed bag of emotions, I would say. They didn't have a great qualifying. Charles, I think for two out of his last four races or three out of his last four races has not come into Q3 at all. And I think Q2 has been last. So that's something to talk about. After his Monaco victory, it's been kind of inconsistent for him. Whereas Sainz has been doing pretty good wins, right? He may not be on the podium, but he's getting that fourth, fifth, sixth. And today he finished a pretty strong fifth. And to a lot of people who did not pay attention towards the end for the excitement, he pitted with 1 lap to go, changed his tires for a soft, and got that extra point. He got the fastest lap. And that, I think multiple drivers tried that, but I think Sainz and Ferrari at least got that strategy right. For Charles, he started off pretty nicely. I think within a couple of laps, he was up by 3, 4 positions. I think within the first lap, he was up by 3 positions. He was doing pretty good. But as usual, people say expect the unexpected. I say expect the expect from Ferrari. As we were talking, the strategies once again came too early. Every driver, all the top drivers who were in the top five are saying that no, we are going to wait for the rains to come a little bit more harder before we go for inters. Ferrari and Charles, I don't know who pressurized who, but decided to change it. And they were already waiting for the rains to happen at a much faster rate. So that was a debacle once again. I don't think if 2 laps later or 3 laps later, if Charles had pitted at the right time, got the inters, would it have got him into the top six? I'm still doubtful, but he would have been probably at eighth or ninth position with some decent points. But the early pit did not, give him any kind of advantage. Whereas Sainz, we all know that, as a smooth operator, he is just kept his head down, kept delivering the consistent lap results, lap timings, and finally the last point absolutely worked for him. So that's really good. And once again, it's surprising that we are losing such a consistent caliber driver from Ferrari to another team next year. We don't know where it is, but that's the story. It's a mixed bag of emotions. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm happy that Ferrari still got some points. And if Charles and team had done a little bit better job, they would have got at least 3, 4 points more. Because now the gap between McLaren and Ferrari has reduced. They are at about 15, 18 points difference, if I'm not wrong. So if another 2 races goes like this, McLaren has a high chance to overtake into the second position.
I mean, McLaren's already focusing on
Oh, no, no.
taking on Red
Yeah,
Bull for the constructor, so I don't think they think
Yeah.
Ferrari's in the loop for it.
it's
But
not
before we
15,
discuss
16.
about
It is 7
McLaren,
points.
Oh, 7 points. Okay, okay. I think probably before the race it was 15,
yeah,
16. So now
but
it's 7.
No,
Okay.
I
but
agree with
Satya,
what
in terms
Prashant
of
said
mixed
because
emotions, I want to ask you before we get to McLaren, I want to ask you about Mercedes mixed emotions. You had Russell at pole, Hamilton, obviously an extremely emotional race, to win at the home ground in the Mercedes for last time, as you mentioned. But for Mercedes, the other side of the pit lane was, Russell having a bad day. And I still don't know what the water situation was.
so surprisingly, so
I've
the
never heard
water
it as a
situation
water.
is one of the
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, go
absolutely
ahead.
the water situation is one of the most rarest
Bizarre.
reasons
Yeah.
on why you would retire a car because many a times there has been water situations, but you always work on it or you say okay fine they try a couple and then maybe this came out of nowhere. There was no communication that was displayed to us saying that Russell was suffering from such an issue. The only news we all of a sudden get is that retire the car. We're like, oh my god, what? What? And then the immediate thought is, would Hamilton be suffering the same? Given that both the Mercedes were in the lead. And maybe, so one, it is a mixed bag of emotions, but I feel that if Russell was also in the picture, there is a good possibility that towards the end, Russell and Hamilton themselves might have been fighting for the win. If, because there was the other strategy that came in saying that Russell also did not have a spare or a new mediums to put on. And Max was flying towards the end. Max was absolutely flying towards the end. If he had two more laps, he would have taken the lead. Because if you looked at the last lap, he had narrowed it down to a minute and 2 seconds. I'm sorry, not a minute and 2 seconds, 1.2 seconds. He had narrowed the gap down to 1.2 seconds. So one more lap and Max is in the lead. So Russell being there would have made it more difficult for Lewis to win rather than helping Lewis to win out. So it is a mixed bag of emotion in that sense where you would want Russell not to have lost, but Russell having retired might have actually helped Lewis over there. So yeah, on that aspect, it is mixed bag. And I do agree with Prashant with regards to what Ferrari was doing, because when they pit Leclerc, no one else had gone on inters till then. In fact, Leclerc, Perez, they all went to inters at the same time. You would essentially want to watch someone else lower down the order go first, then make a judgment call rather than pit Leclerc, who was at that time, I think, in the seventh position, to try and then see what is going to happen. Crazy.
Absolutely. I think I'll just add in here,
Yeah.
right? For Red Bull, I think that was very surprising. I don't know what was the composition of the cars, but see, typically we all know that the hard compound tires are good from a long race sustenance, correct? And over a period of time, it starts to give the dividends. But somehow, Max got that within the first few laps, and it was very surprising to see that a hard compound tire car was beating consistently a medium and a soft compound tire. And as Satya said, another 2 laps, even though Hamilton was driving pretty good, it was very easy for Max to overtake that. So I believe he was on Red Bull. I believe the car was on Red Bull and he had the wings to fly and he was truly flying. It was just a matter of timing. And luckily, it was just 60 laps of race and nothing else
By then,
beyond.
the softs were dead. Softs were pretty
Yeah,
much dead by
yeah,
then.
software did. Yeah, I think people were struggling on inters. That was also pretty hard to believe, but I think they showed the circuit and was just watching it. Right, I think 75% of the circuit was under some kind of a water deformation. The other 25% was dry,
Right.
and that's why the inters were degrading much faster. So it was good to kind of get different interpretation because the drivers had to plan differently, how to conserve the tire in one circuit, one sector versus how to go
And
fast in the
lap
other
over
sector.
lap. It wasn't even
Lap over lap.
consistent.
Overlap.
Yeah. I think 10, 12 laps they had to manage that out. And the moment the sun came out, everybody, of course, as expected, came in for the hard or the medium compound tires.
I mean, the rains have made it very tricky and interesting, I would say, right? Like even the
Yeah.
yesterday qualifying, just the moment you decide to take your lap, a huge factor the rains played in terms of the speeds that, there was a phase where all the cars which regularly clock in at 17, 18, 19, 20 were leading because they had got the timing right. But
Correct.
then obviously Perez with the red flag helped set everything back to normal. Uh, McLaren have now got a brilliant car. They're competing with Red Bull day in, day out. They make Max Verstappen seem like a regular guy at certain parts of the race, which wasn't the case in the first half of the season. But as they get a better car, are we also opening up to the fact that they are making strategy mistakes? Because you had Piastri and Norris well set, actually a bit too successful that
Yeah.
when the rains were about to come in and they had to double stack, they decided to keep Piastri out for one more lap, which impacted his race. And then a decision towards the end, which Norris did in terms of tire selection, which impacted his race. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So McLaren, the thing with what is happening in McLaren, there are two issues, right? First and foremost, with the other most of the other cars, you have a sense of who the primary driver is, or at least who the team is putting their absolute support behind is. McLaren does not haven't made that decision yet, because both Piastri and Norris are of like similar age groups. They are both really good drivers, so that itself is sort of creating a friction over there, because you don't know who to support
I mean,
in case of there is
they
a
did
issue
start
like
off
that.
with Norris as number one and Piastri as two, but with performances coming into play, you're right. Like now they've
Exactly.
come
That
in.
Yeah.
that they are having that sort of an issue. Secondly, right, like you said, they because they are being too successful, they are not able to make such calls. Because what Piastri should have essentially done when they were supposed to lap was fall back a bit so that they get at least 1 second gap. But when PS3, by the time PS3 started to fall back, they were able to achieve only a 0.5 second, which is not enough if they want to double stack. Then you need at least 1 to 1.5 seconds to double stack properly without having without hindering the car behind. And they were not able to achieve that. Similarly, towards the end, when it was supposed to have been the team that made the call of you want to go to, they had mediums. It was not like they didn't have mediums. They needn't have asked Norris what they wanted, because if you watched Piastri's time, he was catching up very quickly and he was setting fastest lap after fastest lap, because the mediums were the ideal tire and they had a medium, which was surprising, because they had a medium. They could have easily just waited a few laps for the tire to catch up, and then the tire could have just blitzed past Lewis Hamilton. But waiting for Norris to take that call is where they went wrong. Rather than the pit crew making the call, inter call should have been Norris, but the medium
Mhm.
call should have been the pit crew.
And I also felt that they asked him for that call very, very late in the game,
Oh, true. Yeah,
right?
they
Like
did.
they're telling him, like he's mentally preparing, like, am I going to box in right now?
Yeah.
And like literally seconds before that, they're like, we have these choices. Hamilton's doing this, Max is doing that. What do you want? So to your point, I felt that at that position, you really want to be telling the driver what you want to go with. Versus, I think all the teams except Ferrari did a great job of asking the drivers about, do you think Inters is the time right now,
Yeah.
especially around the 1920th lap? Because while the rains had come in, the tracks weren't really wet at that moment. So from that perspective, yeah, I felt McLaren did make a mistake there. But Prashant, any other thoughts from your standpoint on the McLaren performance today?
Yeah, I think McLaren performance overall was still fantastic. I think till the rains came in, Piastri was zooming, right? He was really on a different level of driving today. I would say I think the pressure for Lando came in. I think till that 45th, 46th lap, they were fine, correct? I think everything went on to their part. Their pit stop did impact. I think that's where Hamilton overtook Lando in the second pit stop. I think the pressure factor to why
Just
Lando
for everyone to
decided to
know
go,
that Lando took like 2 seconds
yeah,
extra at the pit stop. Like it was about 4 seconds from what you generally see,
yeah.
and that 2 seconds
Yeah.
plays such a crucial role to what Prashant is highlighting.
And I think just when he exited the pits is where Hamilton just zoomed on, and from there was no looking back, right? I feel the another trigger point which Satya highlighted, and I would like to add on is the pressure added to Lando. When Lando heard what was Hamilton doing, and when the pit said your Hamilton's strategy was to go for soft, he I think said no, I want to be on the same compound tire to compete. If the crew had decided no, let's go with medium, I think it may have worked out, we don't know, but most likely the car was suitable for a medium compound tire. But I think that decision making in that pressure factor of you should have thought about what is suitable for your car versus what your competitor is doing, what your rival is doing. I think that changed the factor. If the crew had not told what Hamilton was doing in, most likely Lando might have taken medium because they were the only team to have that advantage of medium.
In fact, no, you are right, because we know how the car was since Piastri put on
Yeah,
mediums, and he
exactly.
was so fast. Towards the end, he was what around 12 seconds behind Norris. I mean, Norris came in
Yeah.
third, so he was just 12 seconds behind third. While initially he was nearly He was 10 seconds behind Sainz and another 5 seconds or 5 seconds or 6 seconds behind the fourth position. So he was 15 seconds behind, but he was going quicker
Much
and quicker
faster.
and quicker,
Yeah,
much
yeah,
faster. So the mediums were absolutely the tire of choice, and they had mediums,
yeah.
which is
Brand
what
new ones
everyone
at that.
was sure they would go for mediums. And then they
Correct.
suddenly put softs, and even the commentators were surprised. They were like,
Yeah.
why?
Why?
But I guess
Exactly.
maybe I'm
Yeah,
just thinking
yeah.
like
Go ahead.
Norris might have, like we did see the start of the race also that, the mediums take some time to crack in. And
Kraken.
then they give
Yes,
brilliant
yes.
performance. I'm thinking that
Mm.
split second, Norris didn't think that he had enough time to crack them in, and that's why he went with the same strategy as Hamilton. And that's a
Possibly.
decision, right? This is that whole think fast and think slow kind of thing. That's a decision
Yeah.
pit crew would have potentially been in a better position to help with.
Exactly. And I think you could see some his reaction, right? When he was interviewed and when he came onto the podium, I think he said the decision from my side was absolutely the incorrect one, and he put his head down and he was repenting. See, that's what makes you different, because you learn from these mistakes and make it better. But that split second decision could have changed the outcome for today. Had McLaren's been on medium, you never know. It would have been probably an easy win for McLaren at the end of the day.
In fact, the funny thing is, this is the second time Norris is doing the same. Like, if you remember, 2021 Russian Grand Prix, it started to rain and the pit crew told him to come in to change. But at that moment, Norris said no. He made his own decision to not go in and change. And he lost there. Today, again, he was in charge of. So, one thing I feel Norris needs to do now is to be able to take correct decisions under pressure, because he seemed to be that is one area where he seems to be lacking, because he's fast, he's aggressive, and he's taking the fight to max. But when it comes to matters such as these, he needs to either trust his pit crew or be able to make the right decision on his own.
Yeah, yeah. I would say just to add on, right? I think this is the time where probably the race engineer should decide, correct? Because he's in a position to assess both the cars, assess the entire, the other 18 drivers, what's happening in, what are they doing. They have the entire analytics, right? So, yes, at the end of the day, the driver may pull the car, may pull the shot to decide, but the race engineer should probably be highlighting that, hey, this is what our recommendation is, this is what it is, and take that 5 seconds extra to just explain. I know 5 seconds matter a lot in Formula One, but if you're in the position where you have the information and the authority, I think you should help the driver. Okay, if the driver may decline, which generally happens, like somebody like Max will say, "No, I want this," right? Or Hamilton will say, "I want this." That's fine, but instead of a choice, at least put the opinion forward and say, "Let's go with this and see the outcomes."
Yeah, I guess it's analysis paralysis to its best
Yeah,
extent. Uh,
correct.
obviously all the British drivers extremely emotional for different reasons. Getting back to this being Hamilton's night, right? Obviously mixed emotions in terms of it's been a long time since he's won home ground. But what do you think is going through his mind when he's kind of seeing Mercedes picking up and the car that he's moving to next year is actually sliding down in terms of performance?
I have a different analogy for that, Vivek. Before Satya answers, let me take that question, right? I feel the most happiest constructor today was Ferrari. Okay. And you may be wondering why, because they're happy that their recruited driver is coming back into form. Okay, so now they need to focus just on the car. Right now, if you think about if Hamilton had not won this, they had to work on the car and on the driver. Correct, but now at least the driver is coming back on the track. That's what I would say. But yeah, see, overall, it was a mixed bag of emotions, right? We saw, I think, not I think he was in tears, not even literally, he was in tears. It took a lot of time for him to come off it. Uh, Nearly 30 seconds he hugged his dad, and you won't believe one interesting fact which I forgot to add is the entire 60 laps was watched by me and my father and my mother. They did not leave my side. Generally that's what would happen some while ago, right? But when they see that the race gets boring, they change their priorities, and you would change your priorities also. But today you won't believe the three of us watched it first lap to last lap, and they both of them said it was an exciting race after a long time. Okay, and this coming from a 70-year-old couple is a big deal for Formula One, correct? And they could see the emotions what Hamilton was going through, right? They know who Hamilton is. They have been following thanks to me and all of that. But if that's the kind of impact a driver can create and their win can matter to him so much, my God, it's truly fantastic. It's truly remarkable that after nearly 2.5 years or more than 2 years, he's come back for a victory, and it means a lot. And I feel it could be a big turning point for himself and for Mercedes. Second half could be for a lot more excitement.
See, frankly, I don't think Hamilton is thinking about Ferrari today because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this win meant a lot to him. As Prashant also said, you knew, I mean, the minute when Bono came and said, "Get in there, Lewis," swear to God, I got emotional because it's been a long time coming, right? The last time he won was Saudi Arabia 2021. He hasn't won since then. It's nearly 2 years. And the minute you hear Bono saying "Get in there," Bono was emotional, and
Yeah.
you could hear Hamilton crying through the radio.
Yeah.
Granted, I mean, yes, maybe after today, when he's going back home, sitting and contemplating, he might think about is his call right or not, because given Ferrari's performance. But one thing you would see there is there is now Lewis Hamilton is a very smart driver. When he moved from McLaren to Mercedes in 2012, everyone said that's a dumb idea
Yeah.
because Mercedes wasn't performing up to par. Mercedes was had just started a few years back. They were still trying to catch up. They weren't anywhere good enough.
I mean, they couldn't
But
get Schumacher
he
on the
was
podium.
Yeah.
they couldn't
Correct.
get Schumacher on the podium. Absolutely. So, but he went to the factory. He spoke with uh,
Engineers.
uh, uh, Niki Lauda. He spoke to Niki Lauda. He was convinced with what they were planning for the future. So, given such a driver, there is something that he must have seen that they have planned for 2025, 26, that he wants to go there. I just hope that Ferrari does not break his record of a podium every season. Because, yes, a win every season, unfortunately, that record is broken. But then a podium every season is one record that he alone has in the entire history of Formula One. So, that is something he might be thinking of later, but tonight he won. There is no other thought that would be going through his mind apart from the fact of the the amazing race that was put together for us and for every single fan of Formula One. In fact, my wife,
Yeah.
like just like Prashant said, usually she doesn't. She was sitting with me throughout the entire race. I mean, she wasn't getting half of it, but like I kept telling, "Oh, this is happening. This is happening." Ooh.
Drive to
Yeah.
Survive
Yeah.
finally had competition on the track.
Yes.
And if Gareth Southgate and the English boys need any hope from having seen a Brit beat the Dutch, then we know what Wednesday UEFA semi-finals is going to look like. But
Wednesday, it's going to be the reversal, Vivek, right? So the orange will beat the three lions
that we will figure
easily.
out on Wednesday. But I think what today's race has also helped, and it's been a pattern that we're seeing over the past few races, that
Uh,
the Constructors' Championship may actually get a lot closer than we thought. Red Bull
yeah.
will actually have to fight through their skin to keep up the constructors, not because of the driver number one, but the driver number two has been having a lot of challenges. Today also he was up at 17th. They were probably using him for test runs for other data, but you know, with McLaren, both the drivers doing really well. We also heard from Satya saying that, they don't even know who's one and two over there. So both are doing really well. They are now aiming towards getting the constructors, fighting with Red Bull for that. Ferrari, Sainz has been consistent for them, as in consistent amongst most of the drivers, I would say, finishing in that top six segment
Yeah.
throughout the season. Leclerc has been mercurial. moving up, winning at Monaco, breaking the curse, and maybe adding that curse to all the other races. We'll find out for the rest of the season. But with
Yes.
Mercedes also now looking towards an upward trend, and I think this win is going to be a big, big, big morale
Uh,
/ confidence booster for them. And the second half of the season, we're going to see a lot of action up front that we didn't get time in today's show to talk about all the action behind, with Magnussen doing really well, by the way, and scoring a lot of points today. But we'll discuss about all of that in our next episode. With that, I want to thank you, Prashant and Satya. Clearly a great day for the Silver Arrows. Thank you for your
yes.
time. And for all our viewers, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on Spotify, feel free to drop in your comments and your thoughts about how the season looks up. And if you're a Hami fan, just comment in Hammer Time. With that, thanks everyone and good night.
Thank you. Good night.